Come, spell weavers, reavers, rogues, and men-at-arms, and answer the call of adventure. Pick up your sword, your axe, your spellbook, your bow, your rulebook, and your dice, and join the forces of good in their eternal fight against vile monsters, conspiring min-maxers, horny bards, and blood-soaked murder hobos. Discover the treasure trove of role-playing games here on Rollin Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide. Good evening, Boneheads, and Merry Christmas. I am your host and king of the Boneheads, Ryan Howard, and this is Rollin Bones, your treasure trove of RPG interviews and other associated things, your one-stop shop for holiday cheer, and of course, I am the R and OSR, as always. Joining us on this fine prelude to Christmas Eve is, of course, a man who needs no introduction in the whole world. You all know him. You all love him. He is the Mr. Burns to Victor Gorchev's Smithers. Ladies and gentlemen, the basic expert. Welcome, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas. Thanks for having me on. This will be a fun topic to talk about. I'm excited to talk about it, so...
Absolutely. And everyone knows the best way to celebrate Christmas, besides putting on silly hats and dorky sweaters, is to talk about Star Wars. Because, everyone knows Star Wars and Christmas, they go together, like peanut butter and jelly.
I can see that. I mean, there is a Star Wars special, so...
Absolutely. Yeah, Shane, I don't have to wear a beard. I don't know if you've noticed. I'm sure John doesn't either.
I actually have a Santa beard back here. I was almost going to put it on, but it'd probably be super annoying, so I didn't put it on.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to get annoying. I know it. I'm going to stick with it because you gotta live the gimmick, but...
Well, and I got the whole coat on. Let's see how long I last in it before I take it off, but we'll see. I don't know.
Vic, I don't know if I just called you gay. I think that's up to your interpretation.
I like people in the chat just saying D6 wins. We can just end the stream.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I told everyone in the lead up to this, not to bury the lead here, but tonight the bulk of our conversation is going to be I won't say a debate because the debate's already been won, but a discussion on the various merits and comparisons between West End Games, D6 Star Wars, which I have here, and of course John has there with him, and Star Wars Saga Edition, which I don't have with me, but, it's expensive. I'm sorry, I don't have a physical copy.
Yeah, you were saying before we went on that it's like more expensive than these. So, I mean, maybe that could be the first point. These right here, I have originals here. So these are originals. They're as old as I am, from 1987 here. And I think this one was $50 on eBay, and I have the source book that I got, and that one was $30 on eBay. So, and you were saying the Saga ones are like going for hundreds of dollars for physical copies to find them.
Yeah, the core Saga Edition book, easily $200 at minimum, and I don't even know if that if that would get you a good quality book. I'm not sure. I've never even attempted to buy one because I've seen the prices and I've just been like, ugh, can't touch that. But like West End Game Star Wars, there is a community dedicated to keeping it alive, and so PDFs are very easy to find.
I mean, that's cool.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was going to completely transition off that topic, so if you had more to say.
No, I forgot what it is. It's all good.
Gotcha.
This is cheaper, and that was the point.
Absolutely. Gotcha. But before we get into our discussion There's one thing I do want to discuss, and that's my kind of strong association with Star Wars around this time of year. Um, it's always interesting to me. A lot of people tend to kind of gravitate towards nostalgic franchises around Christmas time, and I think that's because when you were a kid at Christmas time, school was out, you had a bunch of free time, so you dive headfirst into a video game or watch a bunch of movies. You have the time, and one of the things that I would always go to is Star Wars. I would either play Jedi Academy because I bought that game with my birthday money when I was like 8 years old, and so my birthday's right around Christmas. Always was playing that game around Christmas time. Or if I had a very long time, I would jump on Star Wars Battlefront 2. I would jump into instant action and I'd just load up every single map and just play every single map, both Republic and Clone Army, both kind of time periods, and just go through all of them just because I had the time to. And so because of that, to me, Star Wars and Christmas are like linked just permanently forever.
And I think that's cool. I think one thing that both games can probably invoke and that we should cling to is a time when Star Wars was like good. And it was part of our childhood and we enjoyed it, and every time a new Star Wars thing came out, you were excited and thrilled that it was happening, because I played a lot of Battlefront as well, and now I don't really care to touch any of the new Battlefront games.
Yeah.
So I totally get your association with Christmas. There's a lot of, I'm sure, nostalgia attached to it that makes it special and will always be that way, and I think that's cool. And people that have that sort of thing like yourself should really hold on to that and keep that going, especially in light of the way the franchise has gone in the last decade or so. So,
Absolutely. So, to begin our conversation here, since we're kind of doing this as a mock debate, I will begin with an opening statement on the merits of Saga Edition, and then I will let you give an opening statement on the merits of West End Games, and we'll go from there.
all right.
So, Saga Edition. Yes, it uses the D20 system. Yes, when it came out, everything was D20 adjacent or D20 powered. I understand that. I also understand that it's class-based, and for a lot of people, they just can't reconcile class-based and Star Wars. However, in my opinion, Saga Edition has a kind of wide diversity of options, especially if you're looking to play a Force user, where in Saga Edition, in West End Games, I feel like if a bunch of people at the table want to play Jedi, you're all going to end up with kind of roughly equivalent characters. Whereas in Saga Edition, there's a lot more options to kind of, send your Jedi characters into different kind of schools of the Force. So you've got one that's more of a wizard type, one that's more of a fighter type, one that's kind of more balanced. That's great. Also, I feel like just by kind of the nature of when it came out, Saga Edition has better support for the expanded universe stuff. So, moving beyond the original trilogy into some of the, books and video games that came out after that, and into the prequel era and beyond. So there's a lot of support in particular for the Old Republic. And a lot of people of my generation, if they're going to venture outside of cinematic Star Wars, one of the first places they're going to go is the Old Republic. So because of that, and because of the kind of wide array of options that you're given in the player's handbook to make your characters go in different directions, even if they're ostensibly the same class, I think that Saga Edition is a game worth playing.
Okay. Um, I didn't prepare a statement. I'll admit I've gone into this. I'm going in by the seat of my pants, but I will do the best I can to do West End Game Star Wars D6 justice. So I think to your point of to kind of this almost is somewhat class based in that you have templates. Character creation is obviously very different than what you get in the D20 version. You're given templates, and then you're given 7 dice that you can apply to various subskills of those attributes that you have specific die codes for. So yes, you are correct in that, like most classes, if you're going to be a smuggler, if you're going to be a Jedi, a mercenary, a Wookiee, something like that, you're going to have the same base attribute scores. But the sub skills is where it gets different, and how you improve them, how you apply your points will over time allow your character to become different from, like, if you're playing a Wookiee, it'll be different from your buddy's Wookiee over time, potentially. But at the end of the day, I think what this game does really well is that it really captures the original trilogy vibe and feel in a way, for me, that really captures like that 12-year-old me that when I first saw Star Wars, I thought was the greatest thing ever. I think that this does a really good job of taking those original movies and just mining the old concept art, the unused concept art for it, and creating a very fleshed out world that you can adventure in with your friends. And it feels very original trilogy, which I know people love that have grown up with their prequel films, and there's people that love the prequels. Like, to them, the prequels are what these films were to me as a kid. But I'm not that person. I'm not that guy. I'm a little too old for that. So I think the original trilogy is what started it all. The expanded universe started from these books: the source book, the Imperial source book, the Alliance source book, and many of the adventures. When Timothy Zahn was writing the Thrawn trilogy, he was given these books, these core books, as reference for writing his story. So we wouldn't really have the lore that you mentioned in Star Wars Saga if it wasn't for this game in the first place, I think, and what West End Games did, which was take something that I think George Lucas sort of threw together and made a fun, like, pulpy space opera film out of, and they fleshed out and made a living world that you could adventure in with it. So I think that part is great. I think the mechanics are super simple. It's different, like you said. Saga's a D20. This is D6 based and only D6. D6s are easy to find. And I think this game's just easy to pick up and play. The bare bones rules, let's see. The bare bones rules for this game are, let's count how many pages they are.
Yep.
This is like what players have to memorize. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages. Mm-hmm. It's like the core rules that, like, really all you need to know. So I think that makes it something that's very easy to just sort of you could do it on the fly almost, because everyone's pretty familiar with Star Wars. You can just say, hey, you guys want to play some Star Wars, some West End Game Star Wars, and you can just sit down, pick a template, apply your 7 dice to your various subskills, and you can get going right away. And everyone's going to roughly understand the rules, like, instantly through play. There's not going to be too much confusion. So to me, that's kind of what makes this get, like, knocked out of the park. That and its cinematic nature. To me, it's built for theater of the mind, and I think that part makes it unique and different and quite cool and cinematic at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And this is where kind of the debate portion is going to fall apart, because ultimately I played both games, and I do agree that this is the superior Star Wars experience for the most part. And to address a little bit about what I said, the answer here, in as far as how do you create kind of the best overall Star Wars experience for any era of play, the answer is to use these rules and then find the source book PDF for the era or region that you're playing in that they released for Saga Edition, and just kind of like change things out. You'll have to kind of like switch stats around and stuff like that. You're not going to be able to pull stat blocks out of those books, obviously, but you'll still be able to use all that crunch, all that lore. Say you want to run your game on Nar Shaddaa, like I always tend to do when I run a Star Wars game. These books don't have a lot of information on Nar Shaddaa, but there's entire chapters of books from Saga Edition on that specific planet / moon / city. So if I were to run things the smart way, I would just take all that information and then run it using the D6 rules.
Yeah, I mean, and another point too is the rules for template creation are very easy. So like if you wanted to make something extremely unique, or let's say there's an alien race out there that you know something about in the Star Wars universe, but there's no stat block for it. The rules for doing it in Western Game Star Wars T6 are just like an extra 5 minutes to build the template, and then 2 minutes to add your 7D on top of that. So because I'll admit, like, having gone into this not knowing much, I was kind of turned off at first by the template idea until I read more into it, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, wait, the templates are, and the book says it there, like, they're kind of there just for suggestions, and you're given very clear rules on creating your own templates. So if you want to make a special kind of Jedi, or you want to be a special kind of alien, or a special, like, I'm going to be doing a play-by-post of this on the Gilded server, and Vic wants to play a aging clone trooper, and that didn't exist when this was written, but right. With the simple template creation rules, like you could easily stat out what that would an aging clone trooper would probably be. So I think that's cool. Yeah.
Now, how do you feel that the template system stacks up against what you have with the D20 system, which is an established kind of class path, and even in the case of Saga Edition, like prestige class paths, because we're dealing with essentially a 3rd edition ecosystem?
I mean, given my OSR tendencies, I'm not really big on that kind of stuff. Like, I don't like paths. I don't like I want to build this character, and then in 5 levels, I'm going to be this, and I want to make this choice here. And I don't want to fault Saga for it. Like, here's the thing, I think. This is just drawing from the original trilogy, and that's it. The original trilogy, some of George Lucas's notes, and some unused concept art. That's what went into this. The Saga books, I feel like, because it is that D20 system, by that point, I feel like the D&D, the D20 system, was already being heavily influenced by video games, and that video gamey sort of concept of what it was bleeding into the tabletop RPG sphere at that point. And so the Saga books are not just influenced by the original films and the prequel films, but they're also influenced by that video game influence that's just inherent in the D20 system, as it's been since WotC took it over. So it's just not to my taste, I guess. I prefer, now that I know more about this and have toyed around with this, I think the template system is very simple and elegant, and it allows to create lots of different things that you would otherwise... And you can make any kind of thing you want in it as a character still. You're not really too limited, aside from like the 18D that you're limited to in applying to attributes. But that still gives so much creative freedom, in my opinion, to character creation. And you're not too concerned about, like, well, down the line, all you're worried about is, like, where am I going to dump points and skills? Right. And, like, that's it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and
I don't know. It feels more cinematic, I guess. This is geared towards more cinematic play, and instead of like a Star Wars video game, I guess.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, It's funny that you mentioned video games because when you look at Saga Edition, if you're familiar with Knights of the Old Republic, the system is instantly familiar to you. It's basically the Star Wars D20 system and Star Wars Saga Edition that was an improvement on the original D20 system essentially is the system that powers Knights of the Old Republic and Knights of the Old Republic 2, because BioWare built Knights of the Old Republic on a foundation of what's essentially third edition D&D rules. So you'll see the similarities when you play Saga Edition. But for a lot of people, including myself nowadays, I wasn't always this way, but these days I very much am. Anything in an RPG, a tabletop RPG that reminds you of a video game will probably immediately turn you off, because these days when I encounter video game-like mechanics in tabletop role-playing games, I immediately think limitations.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean the limitations in this are just okay. There's like 26 different templates I think in the back of this book. So I mean already you're given a ton of options of what you could and can't be. And let's say for some reason one of those 20 something doesn't appeal to you, make your own. And really the only limitation is your imagination and the 18 dice that you can apply to skills.
Yep.
Which, so to me, like there's almost like I said, like it's a pseudo class system in that you are, yes, there are templates, and even if you're creating a custom template, you're still creating a template, but it's not quite a class because it's just so freeform. It's so and you know, maybe this comes down to like a totally separate debate too of like this is a skill based game as opposed to D20, which is a level based game.
Yeah.
So I mean, those two things encourage advancement in two completely different ways. And you know, I love my OSR games and BX, but skill based games like this and Traveler and Call of Cthulhu always will have a special place in my heart, because there's just something special to me that skill based games sort of touch on that the level based games do not.
Yeah, and a lot of that I think comes down to whether or not you think Star Wars is something that is designed kind of more with a class-based type ethos or a skill-based type ethos, which I think there's an argument for either way. Because, and this is a discussion that we've had a little bit on the show before, but in my mind, when it comes to fantasy, class-based works a lot better than skill-based. But when it comes to something that's more like sci-fi or more of a modern setting or pulp setting, skill-based tends to work a little bit better. And that's the funny thing about Star Wars. Star Wars is sci-fi, kind of. It's also kind of fantasy. It's also very pulpy. And so it's weird in kind of the genre morass that is Star Wars, and where exactly you play Star Wars or what elements you emphasize with your Star Wars game, whether or not a class-based or a skill-based system is going to be what you're looking for.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, Star Wars is like, it's sci-fi in that there's spaceships and there's droids and robots and laser guns and stuff, but it's also, there's space wizards, and there's a large fantasy element to it as well. So yes, like I can see why some people would like Saga over this, you know, especially if you're a third edition fan and that's just what you're comfortable and familiar with. And I see the merits of how a level-based system in Star Wars would work, but yeah, I don't know, just something about the what feels like almost limitless possibilities with template creation as far as character creation is concerned in Star Wars D6 just really appeals to me. And I just love like the layout in the book too. It's very easy to read, and it's just written. I'll be honest, I've not looked at Saga. I've just never been that interested in anything third edition, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
It just was something that's just not like, it's not in my wheelhouse as far as systems are concerned. But this is written in just such a, like I said earlier, like I was reading this, I've been kind of turned off from Star Wars for probably since probably since The Force Awakens. I liked The Force Awakens when it first came out until I thought about it a little bit, and I'm like, this movie sucks. And I've kind of just been turned off ever since. And so reading this again just kind of like sparked that in me, where that kid in me was excited about Star Wars again.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if Saga invokes that same sort of feeling, but this definitely did.
In my mind, the main merit of Saga, as far as reminding you of the best parts of Star Wars, is just kind of the breadth of what all it covers and how much kind of stuff they put into it. And it can get kind of bloaty at times. I understand how some people would be turned off by just the sheer volume of options, especially since it's in that third edition ecosystem. But you do make a good point that, you know, in a world where Star Wars has become as bloated and overripe and overexposed and corporatized and sanitized as it has been, having something that's kind of, you know, rough and old school and, you know, just kind of bringing Star Wars back to its roots is something that a lot of people are looking for. And you're not going to find that with Saga Edition, unfortunately. You're going to find that with West End Game Star Wars.
I think it's important to point out in chat too here, there's some chat comments here. Shane Winters says he wants to point out the difference between first and second edition of West End Game Star Wars. There's a slight bit of bloat in second edition. Yeah, you know, if you go to Star Wars Timeline .net/West End Games, where you can get a lot of the PDFs for this, there is like a lot of books here, and a lot of the second edition books get huge. I know Max here in chat saying he's not a fan of the Wild Die. I'm not a fan of the Wild Die either, which is why I chose to cover this on my channel, and I choose to play this version of the game as opposed to second, which this, I don't know, I'm of the mind that oftentimes the first time creators try and make something, they kind of, it might be raw and it might be a little rough around the edges, but it's generally going to be a better game than what a lot of later editions become, for the most part. You know, obviously there's exceptions, but like there's just something sort of raw and honest in that first edition of most things, and I feel that in this. So I know some people love their second edition. I know some people love the Wild Die, but yes, the two games do feel a little different, and they do play a little different. My suggestion would be go first edition if you're going to look for it. Again, I got these very affordably, and the PDFs are easy to find online. But, yeah.
Yeah, it's always interesting. The idea of new additions to RPGs. It's something that's become normal because, you know, D&D did it. In a lot of cases, though, there's a lot of iteration for iteration's sake. It has to be different because we put a different title on this book. We called it a new edition, so we have to change something, whether or not that something is, you know, actually needed changing or not. So it is interesting how, with a lot of RPGs like this, you know, the subsequent iterations aren't as good or you know, don't hit quite the same note that the original did. I've not played any of second edition West End Game Star Wars. I've only played essentially first edition rules, so I don't know. I am a fan of Savage Worlds though, so you know, Wild Die is not a bad word to me. I don't know if it works the same way, but
also too, Shane points out the initiative system in this. So it was changed, I think even later in first edition, it was changed from what is written in this book. There was a rules update which changes some target numbers for skill checks.
Yeah.
And the initiative system in this is really cool in that what I like about it is that let's say you're a stormtrooper and I'm a smuggler, and we're going to shoot at each other. Like, who gets to go first in combat? Well, it's whoever rolls the highest, whoever succeeds more. And so then if I hit you and deal damage, well, then your shot just doesn't come off. Or like if you're trying to run, like you would use your movement die or your dexterity or whatever to try and get out of the way to see if you're able, like, if my shot fails against your dexterity to get out of the way and to move and shoot, like then you get to do your thing, and I'm the one that's screwed. I think it's just such a unique way of, instead of like, well, let's roll for initiative every round, it's sort of just declare what you're doing and then roll the dice, and whichever side of that, if it's affecting someone else who rolled better, that person goes first. That's the person that goes first. I think that's so simple and unique. I'd like to see that in more games, and it's a shame they changed it later. I'm assuming Saga has like the traditional individual initiative that we all know and are familiar with, which is fine. You know, it works. There's something to be said about it working, but like there were some unique ideas like that in this that you just don't really see in other games. That I think is, even if you're not going to play this, it's a concept that's interesting to look at, and you should take a peek at how it works, because it could be useful for whatever game you're running, in my opinion, if you want to switch things up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Now, on a completely different subject, one of my favorite things about Star Wars is the fact that it can be run and experienced in a very kind of Western vibe. There's a lot of Star Wars media that's very evocative of Westerns. And I will say right off the bat, Saga Edition does not do a good job of that, because it's class-based D20 system, and D20-based Westerns don't seem to work all that well. With that being said, how do you feel, based on your experience with kind of the West End Games rules, how do you feel that it would do with something like, kind of a Mandalorian type situation where it leans more on the spaghetti Western influence of Star Wars?
I think it'd be perfect. I think it would work really well for that kind of game, because that's another thing that should be touched on. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming in Saga, Jedi could become quite powerful.
Yes,
I'm sure they can become quite powerful. And that's because I think it's referencing, and this bugged me when the prequels came out a little bit, what the Force was and how it worked and how powerful it exactly was and how it could be manipulated. Because in the prequels, I know it's cool, but they're doing the flips and they're doing the super high jumps and they're, doing these superhuman feats of strength, which this somewhat references a little bit in there, and even leaves room for like there's Jedi powers that are go beyond these powers, but they've been lost because the Jedi have all been eradicated. Mm-hmm. So if you are playing a Jedi in this, you are playing like it's a very, I would say Saga is like a very high magic setting. If I'm probably right there, right? Yeah. Probably like if you were to compare it to a fantasy thing, and this is more like low magic, and so I think that's why it would work really well in a Western thing. Like you could throw someone who is still a Force user in this based on these rules, and they're not going to break the balance of the game all too much, at least not for a while. Mm-hmm. So I think that's cool. You could run a game in this where like nobody is a Jedi, and you'll still have lots of fun, and it will work immensely well in that spaghetti Western space opera style game, Crafty Matt's not here, but he's talked a lot about how when I think said he was in high school, he ran a smuggler game for a year or two that was this, and all the guys were just like smugglers. They're all non-Force users that were just out there trying to make a quick credit, So I think it'd work. It's almost like it's built for that kind of game, really. I think it really wants you to play that kind of game.
Mm-hmm. But then kind of swinging to the other side, how do you think West End Games Star Wars would adapt to let's use that same terminology, a higher magic system? Let's say you were playing in, the Republic pre-Clone Wars, not even necessarily the Old Republic, but the Republic like right before the events of the Phantom Menace, or if you were playing during the New Jedi Order, where Luke Skywalker has already established the New Jedi Order. How do you think it would scale with Jedi being a little bit more common? Do you think there's enough variety in what's offered as far as Force powers and Force use? Do you think there's enough there for a game with more of that emphasis on Jedi to work the same that it would in something like Saga Edition?
I mean, I think it probably could. It might not simulate it exactly as well because again, when these were made, like the force powers were somewhat simple, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, I can influence your thoughts. I can move objects with my mind. Luke does a few little force jumps here and there, but it's nothing like all over the place. There's no like super speed running that's like horrible CG.
Yeah.
and, and so that's the kind of powers that this is referencing. I think a referee or a GM who's pretty savvy could probably hack the game to fit it pretty well. For me, I haven't really thought about that because like I'm not really adventuring during the during like prequels or something like that is something that's just not really interested me. I know it interests some people, but I don't know. I'm more interested in the original trilogy era, that era of the dirty ships and stuff just looks like it's cobbled together to get going, rather than what I always felt like the prequels felt like a lot more polished, which always bothered me as well, as far as like the technology is concerned. Look, it just seemed like different tech to me. Like I don't know, it was weird. But I think it could work. Probably not as well as Saga, because the Jedi are shown to be much more powerful in that prequel era and in the Old Republic era, and this era where the Jedi are more prevalent. They're being trained by masters, and they have the Padawan and master relationship. Like, it stands to reason they're going to be more skilled than like Luke Skywalker, who has to kind of teach himself, right? So, I mean, he has teachers, but how much training did Luke actually have? He didn't have nearly as much as people during that those previous eras. So
Right.
I think it could work. It would take some work from a GM, from a referee to make it work, but I think the tools that you need are there. It's just not going to spell it out for you quite as easily as maybe Saga would.
Yeah, and that's I mean, I love West End games, and I'm fully committed to essentially running all of my Star Wars games moving forward in the West End Games D6 system. However, because my brain as a GM goes, how am I going to make the players the most special people, or not the most special people, because I know people are going to be like, well, now you sound like a Sparkle Troll GM. The most important people for the story that they're going to be kind of interacting with. I don't want them to feel like I'm over here doing the grunt work while Luke Skywalker is off doing all of the important stuff. I want the players to feel like what they're doing is the most important thing that could be done at that moment. So, with that in mind, I like to set my Star Wars adventures either just before the Phantom Menace, like the time period where Obi-Wan Kenobi is a youngling or a young Padawan, or go all the way to the other end and have it be fully New Jedi Order. These guys are being trained by Luke Skywalker and Kyle Katarn and Mara Jade to, how to be Jedi, and they're going off into unexplored corners of the galaxy. So essentially, like the areas that Outbound Flight went to is where I would set that game. That's just kind of my ecosystem. That's what I think should be done. And Shauner has jumped in chat here saying never have the players meet their heroes. That's why I like to put like Luke Skywalker in a mentor role, because at that point Luke's story is pretty much concluded, and he is able to be more of that kind of wise NPC that players can come back to. He's not doing his, full-on adventure thing anymore. He's a Jedi Master, and he's, at that point, the Grand Master of the Jedi Order by virtue of being the most powerful Jedi alive. So he's not going to be going around planet to planet, dealing with the Imperial Remnant or the Yuzhong Vong or, whatever threat you want to pull from the expanded universe. That's going to fall on the Knights. And who are the Knights in this case? The players.
I could see that. I guess it's just a different approach to the game. Like I have no problem setting my games during the original trilogy, but just setting the players off someplace else far away where like they're kind of away from the stuff we see in the films. And maybe it's a little bit of trepidation on my part, but because Western games does give you statistics for like Han Solo, Princess Leia, Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader even, so like you can use those statistics and have the players meet these characters. I mean, if you throw Darth Vader at them, they're probably going to die, but but I'm reluctant to use those things in my own games because I feel like could I do justice to that character? Like I don't want to butcher it. I don't want to butcher that character or that's the hard part, I think, of these kinds of games that are like on these known IPs where there's like very famous characters within them, at least from my perspective. And this would be a problem in Saga for me as well if I was going to run a Saga game, is everyone has that preconceived notion in their mind of like who that character is and what they should be, and can I live up to that standard in presenting them at the table? And I would have a very hard time doing that, I think, to make Luke who Luke is, or Vader as terrifying as Vader is, or Han Solo as suave, whatever as he is. Like that would be I'd probably do it if I had to. Maybe I'd give it a shot, but I'd do it with some trepidation and some fear.
And I use the Jedi Academy, Jedi Knight, Dark Forces, that specific series of games as kind of my template for how to introduce established characters into your world, but still have your main character feel like the main character, or still have, in this case, your players feel like the most important character. So Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast. There's an entire level where you're fighting alongside Lando Calrissian. He's there. He's doing stuff, like he's helping you along the way. But Lando never feels like he's more important than Kyle Katarn at that point. There's a similar thing in Jedi Academy. There's a level where you fight alongside Chewbacca. He's there. He's contributing to the adventure that you guys are on, but he's not in any way overshadowing Jaden Core. So having circumstances where your characters are fighting alongside each other, even if like Luke Skywalker is there and he has his lightsaber and he's at the height of his powers doing essentially what he does in like The Mandalorian, have the like paths branch. So like Luke's gonna go over here, he has to take care of this right now, but what you guys are doing right now, this thing over here is way more important, or Luke needs you to assist by doing this, which is going to ultimately help us win the day. But at the end of the day, like your big bad, the Dark Jedi, or Sith Reborn, or whatever you're gonna throw at your players, shouldn't be taken down by one of those main characters. They should be taken down by the players.
Sure, yeah. I mean, for me, for my play-by-post game that I plan on doing for this, it'll be just after the Battle of Yavin. I'm not quite certain where I want to put the start of it at, but it's going to just be like they're in a ship and they're just trying to make credits and survive, in this galaxy where there's now this civil war, this rebellion that's sprung up. How do you navigate that world as just some guys in a spaceship trying to make a credit or two and survive? And what kind of things would you get wrapped up in? That's kind of what I'm trying to figure out. And I'm not opposed, I guess, to having them meet established characters. Again, I just want to, I guess, unlike Disney, You know, if I'm given this character to like represent them in my story, in my adventure, in my at my table, I want to do that character justice and not screw it up.
Yeah.
You know, so not make Luke this bitter old man that drinks green milk from the breast of a weird alien. So,
Yeah, and that's kind of the other extreme is, you want your players to be important, but if you're gonna be, throwing in the classic characters too, you don't want them to be like, you don't want to portray them as like ineffectual or like punk them out to the new players. Like you don't want uh you don't want a PC smuggler to like beat up Han Solo. That's not gonna be fun for anyone at the table, especially like a Star Wars fan. Because even if the person who beats up Han Solo, like that might be a feather in your cap, but at the end of the day, if they're a fan of Han Solo, they're gonna be like, it's kind of like beating up your dad almost.
and like your dad didn't really do anything wrong, and
Yeah.
you still really like him, but you beat him up. No, yeah, that's I guess that's why if I'm going to use those established characters, it's going to have to be with reverence. Kind of off topic, but like I've ran a lot of adventures in Middle Earth, and it's the same thing with that. Like if the players run across Gandalf, or this is in One Ring as well. Like if they run across Gandalf or something like that, like, oh shoot, I better do this right because that's very like important character for them to run across. And so you've got to present that character properly. But I guess that's something that's going to be an issue. Like I said, in this, it's going to be an issue in Saga. No matter what system you're using, that's like a above the system sort of issue that I think that's up to the GM and not the rule set. So,
Now, with that said, there's a certain tier of character that I feel is untouchable, and you don't want to make them look too bad. But if your adventuring party happens to run by Dengar and IG-88, you can fuck up Dengar and IG-88. I'm not gonna. No need to be precious about them, or Bosk or someone like that. Just take them out. You can take them. Come on.
well, and I think like with some of this stuff too, and I think it's what I like about this here. Like if I were to run this, I would run this as if it was 1987.
Yeah.
And all we had was these books and the original trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's not even the expanded universe yet to fuck up. Right? Like it's just to me that's like super freeing as well. Like if you go in with that mindset of this is 1987, there's only been the original 3 films and these books, that means like stars are the limit, quite literally, of what kind of story or adventure that can happen. And so I think that's cool. That's how I'm going to treat. That's how I treat this. Is I love the expanded universe, but I'm also not going to be necessarily beholden to it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I've talked about this particular adventure that I have an idea for several times, but I feel like this is the kind of adventure I would run if you said, all right, Ryan, you have to run something in specifically the time frame of the OT. I would have the party be part of the Rebel Alliance. They end up running from the Imperials, and they crash land on a planet that's not really on anyone's radar. So the Imperials don't have a presence there. It's kind of a desolate place. It's kind of, like off the beaten path. It's the perfect place to try to lay low and hide from the Imperials. But when they get there, they find out that a Jedi who escaped from Order 66 has essentially made himself the warlord of this planet. And they have to deal with the fallout of, there's this Jedi, he's not, if there's a Jedi in the party, he's not following the light side. This guy has definitely kind of given over to the dark side, and he rules these people the same way that the same way that Joruus Sabayoth was when they found him in Heir to the Empire. Something similar to that, only it would be a lot more kind of Thunderdome-y. I'm
I like
picturing
it.
like a pit where this Jedi is like, find me the toughest people in the galaxy and bring them here, and I will kill them to demonstrate my power.
I like it. I mean, this idea of taking out a fallen Jedi, that's cool. I think that's neat. But again, like, yeah, don't be beholden to established lore. I mean, that's what's cool about these books too, is encourages you to make the kind of adventures that you want to make
Yeah.
within the Star Wars universe. Like, here are your Star Wars action figures. Go play with them. you know,
Yeah.
so which I think that might piss off some people, but like that's the I don't know. That seems to be the approach that West End Game Star Wars D6 wants to guide you to. And maybe that's the benefit of it, and why people love and have fond memories of this game, because it was before there was a lot of stuff in the expanded universe for you to sort of screw up.
Yeah.
So they could do whatever they wanted. Like, you could go meet Luke Skywalker and go on a mission with him that probably later contradicted some aspect of the lore that was established at that point, but it wasn't written down yet. You wrote it down. This is what happened. So I don't know. I think that's cool. I kind of want to recapture that and run a game that I want my games with this to feel like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and at the end of the day, that's kind of the best way to experience any licensed RPG that's based around an expanded or a well-known IP or fictional universe. You have this sandbox and all of these Star Wars toys, or DC superhero toys, or whatever it is, whatever the system is, and you can kind of like smash them into each other however you want. So, the ideal is to kind of ignore the canon that's around these IPs and just have a blast throwing anything and everything at the players. That's why like Darth Vader is statted. They statted Darth Vader because they know that some GM is gonna want to be like, all right, you guys encounter Darth Vader, do you think you can take him? Because if they do if your West End Game Star Wars party takes down Darth Vader, I'm gonna say you're GMing it wrong. But
I will agree with that.
The story of we fought and took down Darth Vader is that's one of those like high five at the table moments that people chase with RPGs. So even though you probably did it wrong, that's why stuff like that is present in these books.
Sure. I mean, it's sort of like in the separate. You got to be careful though, because it's sort of like in Call of Cthulhu. This is the problem I had with Call of Cthulhu: is if you throw too many awesome eldritch things at the players, and they overcome them, even if they go a little mad, but you overcome them. They overcome them when they face something else, like, oh, here's you took out Darth Vader, and now here's a group of bounty hunters after you, and they're just like, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
We killed Darth Vader. Like, like it's you sort of throw a wet. It seems awesome, but you throw a wet blanket on it. So you have to use those sorts of things very carefully. Yes, they put them in there because they wanted to give you all the toys to play with, but yeah, you got to be careful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I shot Azathoth in the face with a bazooka. What are you going to do now?
Yeah. Oh, this mummy creature that you're throwing at me, I'm not scared of that. A stupid mummy, or a skeleton. I blew up Cthulhu's face with a stick of dynamite. I shoved it down his throat. Like, it's no big deal.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I guess to kind of round out the Star Wars discussion before we get into our secondary topic here, I have now settled on, and I kind of felt this way coming in, but I have now settled on the system that you want to use to run Star Wars is West End Games D6 role-playing. Even you, Sexbot, that has showed up in my chat, you should also run your Star Wars games using Weston Game Star Wars D6. And I hope you find whoever it is you're looking for in here. Lord knows this is an RPG show. None of us are having sex, so...
I have proof I did it one time. I have a daughter, so... At least once.
But if you want to expand kind of the possibilities of the worlds that you're in, finding that Saga Edition material, especially, I believe someone earlier said, Shane Winter earlier said the D6 community has actually done a lot of the heavy lifting for you as far as restatting Saga Edition content to fit within the D6 system. So those resources are out there. Definitely combine your forces there and make the ultimate Star Wars experience for yourself and your players.
Yeah, why not? Why not? It's there.
So we do have an alternate topic here as we come to the closing minutes of the show here. Today, one of my favorite YouTubers, Short Fat Otaku, released a video that he called the Brain Dead Twitter Discourse Awards. And he was talking about all of the various Twitter discourses that were just, stupid that he encountered this year. And so I'm going to do something similar here. But because this is Rollin Bones, because this is your RPG treasure trove, we're going to focus it in on role-playing games and role-playing Twitter, because Lord knows there are plenty of brain-dead Twitter discourses within just our narrow field here. So to kick it off here, John, what was your favorite brain-dead RPG Twitter discourse this year?
There's been a couple. Some of them I've instigated myself, but I guess most recently there was that one where that podcast was talking to some random danger-haired sparkle trolls about a character shouldn't die until the player is ready for the character to die, and just the advice. It's funny, but it's also just like shit advice. It's gonna make people's experiences at the table just awful for everyone. Like the GM, the player. It's gonna ruin games. You're giving advice to ruin games, and you think you're doing it as good advice, and it's just like the cringiest stuff you'd ever hear. Like, oh, my character can't die till I'm ready for them to die. I don't know. You consented to having your character die when you fucking wrote your HP total on the paper. So,
yeah,
that one was pretty good.
Character death. It was one of those things I didn't even expect there to be a discourse around. Like some of the stuff, I understand why certain people feel certain ways. I think they're stupid and they're wrong, but I understand where they're coming from. Character death, I don't get it at all. That the possibility is present. You can die in video games. You can die in almost any, form of narrative. This isn't a fantasy novel.
Go read a book if you want that.
Yeah, I don't know what else to tell you. The character that you start with probably, I don't know about probably. I think that depends on how you personally play your character. But the character you start with might not be the character you end with, and that's fine. That's how the game works.
Yeah. I'll say one more too. Was back in February, so it was at the beginning of the year. Right around my daughter's birthday, I made a tweet making fun of e-thoughts in the TTRPG sphere. And it was just a complete shit show. Like I was getting DMs of cleavage and boobs and tweets at me of it. Like, haha, you stupid incel. Like you hate women. So here are my boobs. And it was like, what's wrong with you people? So that was kind of funny. It kind of proved my point too. I was just making fun of how these e-thoughts manipulate nerds and the iconography of the hobby in order to funnel people to like their OnlyFans or something, and it pissed off a bunch of people. So that was funny. That was another one that was fun for me.
Yeah, and I mean, like, this is one of those things that's going to get clipped and possibly, well, I don't know if I warrant discussion on a low-level podcast that's the opposite of what I talk about here, but what value do those people bring to the game? I mean, yeah, we all, growing up, like the idea of, girls playing games with us just because they mostly didn't. But you stand next to a stack of books and a D20 with your boobs hanging out. What are you contributing to the discourse of how we play these games, how we run these games? You're not helping us become better players or better dungeon masters. You're just, this is something where there is clout to chase, so you are chasing clout in that particular manner because role-playing games have had a surge in popularity. So my whole thing about like influencers and influencer culture, I don't like it, but I respect the people who are actually doing creative work, who are actually making people think about the game and how it's played. Even, whatever your thoughts on, someone like Matt Colville, and I know, some people love him, some people hate him. Matt Colville has a couple times made me think about how I play this game. So I'm not willing to, throw him out and say he's completely worthless, because he's said a few things that have gotten me thinking about, the way I think about this game. So that's what I want more of. And if you are doing that and you also just so happen to have your boobs out, then fine. I guess I would question, how fulfilling is that for you? Like, is that really what you want to be known for? But, if you're talking about the game, fine. But if you're just, ooh, I'm going to roll my dice very seductive, I don't need you here.
Those are two of mine. You only asked for one, but I gave you two. Sorry.
Victor has brought up one of my favorites here. Having to know the basic rules is gatekeeping. That one has popped up. But I think, that one aside, this one is also one that Crossface participated in a lot. And I'm not calling
he instigated it.
I'm not calling Crossface brain dead, because what he was doing was saying very intelligent things about this, and the discourse that popped up around it was brain dead. But the idea of rules as written being something bad, that's just stupid. The idea that playing rules as written is somehow inferior to playing a game that has a bunch of house rules, or I understand there are people who get very high and mighty about playing rules as written, which is part of the brain dead discourse. That certain movements who are like, we play strictly by the book, the way that it was intended, as our forefathers handed down to us. No, you don't. But that's being dogmatic about it is also brain dead. But the people who are like, no, you shouldn't ever play rules as written, you shouldn't ever default to what's in the rule book, then why do we have a rule book to begin with? What's the point of rules if we're not going to follow them?
Well, oftentimes, like, they homebrew these rules to solve problems that are solved by the rules in the book they refuse to read.
Yeah.
So and those rules in the book are often better than their homebrew nonsense, more often than not. Like, if they just took the time to read it, it's like, oh, it's right there. It fixes the problem. And it's better than the solution you came up with. Look at that, Mm-hmm. I'm a big advocate of at least try and apply the rules as written as best as you can. Go as close as you possibly can to them, and then see what you don't like, and then change it. But like, give it a shot first, because obviously the designer put those rules there for a reason, because they thought they worked. At least see if they work first before you toss them out. You can't. you can read a rule book and kind of simulate in your head how the game is going to play, but you really need to get it to the table to really test how it's going to play, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other brain dead discourse that I wanted to mention here, and I don't know if Dano is still watching. This is something I actually want to have him on the show to talk about at some point. But Dragonlance.
Oh yeah.
There was a lot of brain dead Dragonlance discourse online, whether it was the people who essentially said Dragonlance was the first like fantasy narrative to not be racist, and essentially Dragonlance was like a progressive fairy tale or something like that. And then at the same time, when the Dragonlance stuff actually came out for 5th edition, the behavior of the quote-unquote professionals who worked on that book, when they were questioned about why are you spelling things wrong and why is your art terrible and why aren't you paying attention to the actual rules that were laid out by Weiss and the Hickmans in creating this, you seem pretty careless about your stewardship of this IP, and them just having complete and total ass-mad meltdowns on, just everyday gamers on Twitter asking sincere and fair questions. That was a brain-dead discourse.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the thing is, Yodano actually said he liked the art. He said, like, the art is pretty good. It looks Dragonlance in the art, but the misspellings. And it was an artist who jumped on him and like gave him a hard time, which is hilarious to me because he complimented your art. Why are you getting bent out of shape? Like your part, he had no problem with. Why are you upset? So, yeah, it was pretty brain dead. There's a lot of people in this hobby that seem incapable of taking criticism. People like you and me, like we get shit all the time.
Yeah.
And so, you just learn to deal with it. Like, whatever, it's fine. Yeah, maybe actually that person maybe they have some merit in their criticism of me. I'll try and take that to heart. But like, man, some of these people are just, I don't really like that this rule here is here. You're a bigot and I hate you. I hope you die. It's like, whoa, relax.
Or I believe you should put the bare minimum of effort into this thing that you're doing, and people saying, well, now you're just trying to keep me out. You're trying to gatekeep me. No, I want you to do what you're doing well. I want you to actually put some effort into something for once. This is something we all take seriously, and the more of you who are kind of poisoning the well of interest, imagine a brand new gamer goes into one of these, loosey-goosey, the rules don't matter, I don't even know what's in the 5th edition DMG, I'm just flying by the seat of my pants games, and they have a bad time. How do you think they're going to feel about the game moving forward if that was their first experience? People talk all the time about, like, the overly harsh DM who really, he was, such a dictator, and it really turned me off of role-playing games for quite some time. I think what's more common is the GM who just kind of let everyone run hog wild. There was no structure. There was no order built in. I think that's a lot more common than, that DM was a real dictator. I think, that DM needed to control his table more and needed to, be consistent with his rulings. I think that's more of a common problem than, being too harsh or too controlling over your table.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a much bigger. There's apparently a DM crisis in 5e right now, and I made a video about this. A bunch of people have made videos about this now, and I was like pretty surprised by the number of 5e DMs that are current 5e DMs or former 5e DMs who no longer do it, and they say, like, honestly, running this game for these people, the players in this system, is just not worth it for me anymore. I'm switching to OSR. I'm switching to Savage Worlds. I'm switching to something else. They're playing other games now because they just don't want to put up with this BS anymore. Yeah. So, and this seems to be a problem that is relatively contained within the 5e sphere. So, something's unhealthy in that quote unquote community. So
Yeah, I mean, honestly, my sincere hope for 2023 is that as we get closer and closer to the launch of D and Done or One D and D or whatever you want to call it, whatever your clever nickname is for Hasbro trying to EAify Dungeons and Dragons. I hope that the closer we get to that, the more people kind of realize we need to go back. You know, we need to return to monkey, as it were, with RPGs. And so, honestly, for anyone who's looking for that more traditional, more stripped back, less essentially homogenized and corporatized version of role playing, this game right here that we've talked a lot about, Star Wars D6, it's a good game to get that experience from. It's, very much a, the rules are here, the structure's here, but the rules aren't going to get in the way of kind of the Star Wars experience. There's not a lot to learn. It's, just a matter of learning some basic mechanics and then letting imaginations run wild, letting the dice fall where they may, and seeing how, those outcomes shake out.
yeah, I agree. Play other games. Just broad,
Yeah.
even if you plan on sticking with 5e or even playing 1D&D, God forbid, playing other games and broadening your horizon is only going to be good for you. And if you're a player or you're a DM or GM, just playing one game, one system in my mind is sort of like you just eat dino chicken nuggets and mac and cheese for every meal, and you refuse to eat vegetables or you refuse to drink your water or something like that. So
Yep.
yeah, branch out, have a balanced RPG diet.
Yeah, branch out and embrace structure. Embrace the order that comes out of the games that you play. I know that's going to sound weird considering how much I've talked about story and role play and how important they are. But here's the thing, like I was talking about with Servant of Shiloh, these are role playing games. So there's role playing, there's, character interaction, there's story, there's that kind of stuff. But there's also structure. There's rules that keep it from just being a LARP or, playing pretend on the playground, where one kid wants to be a Pokemon when you're trying to play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That's, embrace structure, embrace the rules and the basic architecture of your games. And Vic, we will dinner shame you all we want.
Don't dinner shame me. Are you eating dino chicken nuggets and mac and cheese? I mean, that's good, but you shouldn't eat it for every meal.
Absolutely.
Just like how you shouldn't just play 5e, which Vic doesn't do. Vic plays lots of different stuff.
He does. He absolutely does. Sometimes he goes so crazy he cuts his chicken nuggets into the shape of robots.
He dips them in ketchup or barbecue sauce.
Yep. Absolutely. Gotcha. So that's going to do it for our time this evening. This has been a great holiday special here, a great, Star Wars holiday special, talking about Star Wars Western Game, Star Wars Saga Edition, and rounding it out with a little bit of an overview of our favorite, least favorite Twitter moments from the RPG world. So thanks for coming on this week of Christmas. I appreciate you taking the time to come on here, John, and I really had a great time.
Oh, thanks for having me on. It was fun. I'm going through this on my channel slowly, so happy to come on and talk about a fun game that I think more people need to check out.
Absolutely. And next week, we will be back here, same time, same place, and I will be joined once again by Tim Mathias from the Knights and Nerds podcast. One of my favorite people of all time, great guest, been on the show several times, and he and I are going to be talking all about villains in RPGs, how to create them, how to run them, all about villains next week on Rollin Bones right here. So I hope you guys will join us. And until then, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I am so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, with John the Basic Expert, and I will see you guys next time.